the quiet hush of the evening, when the world begins to drift toward dreams, imagine a soft breeze moving through a field of golden grains. Each stalk sways gently beneath the moonlight, whispering stories of seeds once planted long ago. Some grew tall and strong, touched by kindness and care. Others withered, forgotten, born of anger or neglect. The earth remembers them all, for nothing we sow ever truly disappears. Tonight, as you rest, we'll journey into a story about karma, the tender law of cause and effect that guides every heartbeat, every word, every thought. It is not a rule meant to punish, but a song of balance, teaching us that what we give to the world will one day return to us, shaped by the love or sorrow we've shared. Perhaps you've felt it before, a kindness unexpectedly returned, a hurt that found its way home. A gentle reminder that the universe listens more deeply than we realize. So, as the night folds around you, breathe slowly and let go. Feel your heart soften like soil after rain. In this story, you'll see how even the smallest seed, a word, a smile, a single act, carries the power to bloom into peace or pain. Stay with me, and let this bedtime tale from Buddhism for sleep guide you through the timeless rhythm of karma, where every breath you take is both a planting and a harvest, and every moment an invitation to rest in compassion. Once, in a valley embraced by mist and morning light, there lived a humble farmer named Arun. His life was simple, marked by the rhythm of the seasons, by the song of water running through his fields, and by the whisper of wind moving through the rice stalks. Each day he rose before dawn, his feet sinking into the cool earth, his hands calloused yet gentle as he tended to his crops. To Arun, the soil was more than land. It was a living memory. His father had taught him that every seed carried a story, and that to plant was not merely to grow food, but to shape the future. Whatever you sow, his father used to say, the earth will remember. It may take a season, or it may take years, but one day the harvest will come. As a boy, Arun had believed those words without question, but as he grew older, their weight deepened. The valley was kind but unpredictable. Sometimes the rains came too soon, sometimes too late. Some years his harvest overflowed. Others brought drought and hunger. Yet he never stopped planting. He had learned to trust the unseen work of the soil, just as he trusted the unseen law that guided all things. One morning, as the first light touched the hills, Arun stood by his fields holding a handful of seeds. They were small, almost weightless, yet filled with promise. He closed his eyes and whispered a quiet prayer before letting them fall. May these seeds grow in kindness, he murmured. He believed that the thoughts and emotions one held while planting could shape the harvest, for the earth, like the heart, absorbed everything offered to it. That day, as he worked, he noticed a boy watching from the edge of the path. The boy was thin, his clothes worn, his eyes bright with curiosity. When Arun approached, the boy stepped back nervously. "Are you hungry?" Arun asked softly. The boy nodded. Arun smiled and handed him a bundle of rice wrapped in leaves. "Come back tomorrow," he said. "There is always work here for willing hands." The boy, whose name was Neelan, returned the next morning and the morning after that. Soon he became like a shadow to Arun, following him through the fields, learning when to water, when to prune, when to let the earth rest. Arun taught him not only how to grow crops, but how to listen to the soil, the wind, the silence between breaths. "The earth teaches patience," he said. "It gives when we give, and it holds when we harm. Remember that every action, like every seed, has its season. Years passed in this quiet rhythm. The fields thrived, the village prospered, and Nilon grew strong and kind. Yet not everyone shared the same heart. In the neighboring valley lived another farmer named Boro, whose lands bordered Arun's. Boro was ambitious and proud, always seeking to expand his fields, to harvest more than anyone else. He often mocked Arun for his gentle ways. "You waste time on prayers," he would sneer. "The soil needs sweat, not words." Arun only smiled and replied, "The soil listens to both." One year, when the rains came early, Boro's greed grew with his crops. He ordered his workers to divert the river, to ward his land, to flood his fields, and yield more grain. The water, stolen from its path, left Arun's land dry. When Arun discovered what had happened, he said nothing. He simply knelt at the edge of his cracked field, pressed his palm to the earth, and whispered, "Forgive him. May he see what he has done." His wife, Myra, could not understand his calm. "Why don't you confront him?" she asked. "Your crops will die." Arun looked at her gently. "If I return anger for harm, I plant another seed of suffering. Let the earth decide." The months that followed were harsh. The sun burned fiercely and the soil hardened. Arun worked quietly, watering what little he could, sharing what remained of his grain with Nilan and the other villagers. Then one night, the sky darkened with storm clouds. Rain fell in torrents, the river swelling beyond its banks. By morning, the neighboring valley was a sea of water. Boro's fields were washed away, his crops ruined, his storehouse destroyed. When the storm cleared, Arun found him sitting in the mud, his face pale with disbelief. Without a word, Arun brought food and offered his hand. Boro stared at him, speechless. "Why would you help me?" he whispered. "Because suffering is the same in every heart," Arun replied. "When we give kindness, we harvest peace." That night, as the rain softened to a steady whisper, Arun sat outside his home, watching the lanterns flicker in the wind. Nilan joined him, resting his head against his teacher's shoulder. "Master," the boy said, "was that karma?" Arun smiled. It was the river finding its path again. Karma is like that, neither reward nor punishment, but balance. The world moves toward harmony, even when we cannot see how. He paused, gazing toward the horizon. "Remember this, Nilan. The seed we plant is not always the one we harvest. Sometimes what we give returns through the hands of others, through the kindness we never expected. That is the mystery of cause and effect." Over the years, the story of the two farmers spread through the valley, told by travelers and monks who passed along the mountain roads. They spoke of Arun, who repaid harm with compassion, and of Boro, who learned humility through loss. The fields flourished once more, nourished by both rain and forgiveness. And those who visited the valley swore that the rice there had a sweetness unlike any other, as if it carried the taste of peace itself. But the lesson of karma did not end there. As time passed, new challenges arose. When Arun grew old, he passed his fields to Nilon, who continued his teacher's work. Yet he struggled with doubt. He saw injustice in the world, people who lied and prospered, others who were kind and suffered, and he wondered if karma truly existed. One evening, as he sat by the river, he spoke aloud to the night. "If what we give always returns, why does the world still bleed?" The wind carried his words away, but the river seemed to answer in its steady song. The next morning, as he worked the fields, Nilan saw a group of travelers approaching. Among them was a woman carrying a small child. She looked weary, her clothes torn from the road. Nilan offered them food and water, and as they rested, the woman said, "We have walked far from the northern hills. Our village burned, and we have nowhere to go." Nilan's heart ached. He gave them shelter for the night, and when dawn came, he told them to stay as long as they needed. Days became weeks, weeks became months. The woman helped in the fields, and her child laughed among the rice stalks. One evening, she approached Nilan and said, "My son has not gone hungry since we met you. There is something I must tell you. Years ago, a man saved my father during a great flood. He said his name was Arun." Nilan felt a quiet shiver pass through him. The circle had closed, unseen yet perfect, that night. He wrote in his journal, "The seeds we plant may sleep for 1,000 days, but when the time is right, they rise. Nothing is lost. The earth forgets nothing." As he placed his pen down, he looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, Master. I understand now." The wind moved through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of water echoed like laughter. From that time on, Nilan taught others as Arun once had. He told them that karma was not fate written in stone, but a living field we cultivate with every thought, every word, every choice. "What you sow," he said, "you will one day walk among, so plant gently." And as the years turned, the valley remained fertile not because of rain or sunlight alone, but because those who lived there had learned the quiet power of cause and effect. The people of the valley said that when one walked through the fields at dawn, one could feel the presence of kindness beneath the feet, pulsing through the earth like a heartbeat. They said it was Arun's legacy, the harvest of his compassion, returning endlessly in every generation. And as the wind carried the scent of ripened grain across the hills, it whispered the same truth to all who would listen. What we sow, we shall surely reap, and in that harvest, we find both our reflection and our redemption. As seasons came and went, the valley seemed to breathe in harmony with the people who tended its soil. Nilan, now a man of gentle strength and quiet patience, had taken the place of his teacher, Arun. His hands carried the same steadiness, his eyes the same calm light that once shone in the elder farmer's gaze. Yet within his heart, the questions of karma still flickered like embers that would not die. He had seen good people struggle, seen greed rewarded, and though he held faith in the balance of life, he often wondered when and how that balance would return. Each morning, he rose before dawn to walk through the fields, the earth cool beneath his bare feet, the mist wrapping around him like a soft cloak. The river's voice was the first thing he heard, flowing eternally past the edge of the valley. It reminded him of his teacher's words, "The river does not rush toward fairness. It simply moves toward the sea. Karma is not about justice, it's about flow." One autumn, when the harvest was nearing its end, Nilan's peace was tested. A wealthy merchant from the city arrived in the valley, seeking to buy grain at unfair prices. The villagers resisted, but their stores were low and their debts were high. Nilan, as their leader, tried to reason with the merchant. "Let your profit be fair," he said gently. "What you take unjustly now will return to you in hardship." The merchant laughed. "Old tales for simple minds," he said. "Karma cannot fill my purse." He bought their grain for less than half its worth and left, leaving behind anger and despair. The villagers came to Nilan that night, some demanding revenge, others losing faith in his calm. "You told us," The world gives back what we give, one man said bitterly. But he takes, and we are left with nothing. Nilon listened, his heart heavy. Do not mistake delay for absence, he replied softly. The seed beneath the soil is silent before it grows. Yet as he spoke, he felt his own conviction tremble. Months passed. The valley endured hardship that winter, yet no one went hungry, for Nilon shared what little he had with all. He remembered Arun's words, compassion multiplies when divided on, so he gave without measure. One day, a traveler brought news from the city. The merchant who had cheated them had lost everything in a fire. His wealth, his home, even his ledgers had burned to ash. He was ruined overnight, the traveler said. Some say it was chance. Others say the wind itself turned against him. The villagers whispered among themselves, some rejoicing, others uneasy. Nilan only bowed his head. The harvest comes when it must, he said. But that night, as he sat by the fire, he felt no satisfaction, only a quiet sorrow. He realized that karma was not vengeance, it was understanding. To witness another's suffering, even if born of their own greed, was not a triumph, but a mirror. The fire that consumed the merchant was the same fire that once burned in Nilon's own heart when he desired fairness more than peace. In the following years, Nilan began teaching the younger farmers not only how to plant and harvest, but how to live with intention. The true seed, he told them, is not in your hands, but in your thoughts. Every intention you sow will bloom in the garden of your days. He taught them to speak kindly, even when anger arose, to forgive before sleep, to share before being asked. Some listened with open hearts, while others scoffed. Words cannot change the weather, one young man said. Kindness cannot stop misfortune. Nilan smiled gently. No, but they can change how you meet the storm. One summer, a drought struck the valley. The sun blazed without mercy, the river shrank to a ribbon of silver, and the fields cracked beneath the weight of heat. Fear grew among the people. They prayed for rain, but the sky remained silent. Some grew angry, blaming fate, blaming the gods, even blaming Nilon. Your lessons of patience are empty, they shouted. The earth gives us nothing. Nilan did not defend himself. He walked into the fields and knelt, pressing his hand into the dry soil. You are still alive, he whispered to the ground. We are still alive. The balance has not vanished, only hidden. He gathered the villagers and said, let us dig a well together. We cannot command the sky, but we can open the earth. Day after day, they worked beneath the relentless sun. Many wanted to quit, but Nilan continued with calm persistence. Do not think of the water, he told them. Think of the effort as the seed. The fruit will come when it is ready. At last, one morning, the ground gave way, and cool water burst forth. The villagers shouted with joy, their despair melting into laughter. That evening, as they celebrated, Nilan sat quietly beside the well, watching how the torchlight reflected on the water's surface. He thought of karma, again how effort ripens unseen, how patience itself is a form of faith. The next day, rain finally came, gentle at first, then steady, soaking the thirsty fields. The people rejoiced once more, but Nilan only smiled and looked toward the sky. The earth was waiting for our hearts to soften, he murmured. As time passed, stories of Nilan's wisdom spread beyond the valley. Travelers came seeking advice, not about farming, but about life. One young man asked him, how do I make sure my karma is good? Nilan answered, do not worry about good or bad. Worry about being awake. Karma does not count. It reflects. Live each moment as though it will echo across eternity, because it will. Another asked, can we escape the pain our past actions bring? Nilon paused before answering. You cannot escape the echo, he said, but you can sing over it. If your past brought sorrow, let your present bring compassion. In that way, the song of your life becomes harmony. In his old age, Nilan began to feel the weight of years pressing softly upon him. His steps slowed, his breath grew shallow, yet his heart remained light. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, he called the villagers together and said, my time in the fields is ending, but the seeds we've planted will continue long after I am gone. Do not forget what you have learned, not from me, but from the soil, the river, and the rain. The earth teaches better than any man. He walked to the edge of the field, where a single tree had grown from a seed he once planted as a child beside Arun. The tree stood tall now, its roots deep, its branches wide. This, he said, touching the bark, is the proof of karma. A small act of care can become a forest. What you nurture and love will always grow beyond your sight. That night, as he lay beneath the open sky, Nilan dreamt of the river. It flowed endlessly, reflecting starlight, carrying petals, leaves, and memories downstream. He saw Arun standing on the far shore, smiling as he once did, and behind him, countless faces of those who had lived, loved, and learned in the valley. They were all part of the same current, the same great weaving of cause and effect. When Nilan awoke, the morning light had just begun to touch the horizon. He breathed deeply and whispered, I understand now, Master. Karma is not about what happens to us, is about what we become through what happens. He smiled, feeling an immense peace rise within him, and with that breath, he passed into the stillness of dawn. The villagers buried him beside the old tree, where the soil was rich and fragrant. Over the years, flowers began to bloom around his resting place without ever being planted. The people called them the blossoms of karma, believing they grew from the kindness he had sown throughout his life. And so the story continued, whispered to every child born in the valley, that whatever we plant, in word or in silence, will one day return to us. The valley thrived, not because of fortune or rain, but because its people had learned to tend not only their fields, but their hearts. And when travelers came and asked why the land was so green, the villagers would smile and answer, because here we remember what we plant. Many generations passed after Nilan's time, and the valley continued to flourish like a living hymn to the law of cause and effect. The children of those who had once worked beside him grew into wise men and women, their hearts shaped by stories that whispered through the fields like wind through ripened grain. People no longer spoke of karma as something to be feared, but as something to be understood, a natural rhythm guiding both joy and sorrow, a reminder that every act is a seed and every seed a mirror. The valley had become known as a place of quiet goodness. Travelers said that even the air felt softer there, and the river's song carried peace to those who listened. Yet even in a place built upon wisdom, new generations needed to learn what their ancestors had known. For understanding fades when it is not lived, just as soil dries when left untended. So it was that one day, a young boy named Tao began to question the truth of the stories he had been told. He was bright and restless, full of dreams that reached beyond the valley. While others worked the fields, Tao sat by the river, reading or staring into the distance, wondering if the world beyond the mountains followed the same rules his elders spoke of. If karma is true, He asked his grandmother one evening, "Why do some good people suffer and some cruel people prosper?" She smiled gently, brushing his hair with her wrinkled hand. "Because, my dear, karma is not a book that we can read from the first page to the last. Some stories began before we were born, and others will finish long after we are gone." Tao frowned, unsatisfied. "That sounds like guessing," he said. "I want to see it with my own eyes." His grandmother chuckled softly. "Then one day you will, though perhaps not in the way you expect." When Tao became a young man, his curiosity pulled him away from the valley. He wanted to see the cities, the wealth, the power he had heard of from traveling merchants. With his grandmother's blessing, he packed his few belongings and followed the road that wound between the mountains. The journey was long and filled with wonder. He saw villages where people lived in laughter and others where faces were hardened by hunger. He saw temples shining with gold and markets filled with noise. For a while, he forgot the quiet rhythm of home. The city dazzled him with its lights, its music, its endless motion. He found work with a merchant who sold silken spices, a man who spoke kindly but thought only of profit. "The world rewards the clever," the merchant told him. "If you wish to succeed, you must take what you can before someone else does." Tao listened, unsure. But as the weeks passed, he began to believe those words. He learned to bargain hard, to flatter and deceive when necessary, to close deals that favored himself. His purse grew heavy, and so did his heart. He told himself it was only business. Yet at night he often dreamed of the river and the sound of wind through the rice. One day, a poor widow came to the market to sell her handmade baskets. Tao saw how the merchant laughed at her, offering almost nothing in exchange. Something inside him stirred, but he said nothing. Later, when he found one of her baskets torn and discarded behind the stalls, he picked it up and repaired it. Perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of memory. That evening, he carried it back to his small room and placed it by the window. The next morning, sunlight poured through the weave of bamboo, scattering patterns across the floor. For a moment, Tao felt peace. He realized he had missed that feeling for a long time. Seasons changed, and Tao's fortune grew. But with his success came loneliness. Friends surrounded him when he had wealth, but when trade slowed, they vanished like mist. One night, while returning from the market, Tao found the same widow sitting by the road, shivering in the cold. Without thinking, he gave her his cloak and a small pouch of coins. She took his hand and said softly, "The seeds you forgot to plant will find their way back to you." Her eyes were kind, though filled with a light that seemed ancient. He wanted to ask her what she meant, but she was gone before he could speak. The next day, misfortune struck. A storm tore through the city, flooding the markets, ruining goods, and carrying away much of Tao's merchandise. His employer, enraged, blamed him for the loss and dismissed him without pay. For a time, Tao wandered aimlessly, his savings dwindling. At first, he cursed his luck, but as days turned into weeks, something inside him began to shift. He remembered the widow's words and wondered if perhaps this was the harvest of all he had sown: the greed, the pride, the silence when kindness was needed. One evening, as he sat hungry beneath a bridge, he saw a small boy stealing bread from a vendor. The boy ran but stumbled, and the bread fell into the mud. Tao caught him before the crowd could punish him. He handed the boy his own remaining coin and said, "Take it and go home." The boy looked up in surprise and whispered, "Why would you help me?" Tao smiled faintly. "Because someone once helped me, and I did not understand it then. The boy bowed and disappeared into the night, leaving Tao with a strange warmth that filled the space where despair had been. In the weeks that followed, Tao began helping others wherever he could, carrying water for the elderly, sharing food with beggars, repairing the widow's baskets. He no longer thought of reward or punishment. He simply acted from the quiet voice that had awakened inside him, the one that sounded like wind through rice. Slowly, life began to open again. One morning, a caravan stopped in the city. Its leader, an old merchant with kind eyes, saw Tao helping a group of travelers repair their cart. "You work with care," the man said. "Would you travel with us? We trade across many lands, and I need someone I can trust." Tao hesitated, then agreed. The journey with the caravan changed him. For the first time since leaving the valley, he saw the world not as a place of gain and loss, but as a web of giving and receiving. Each village they passed offered lessons: the generosity of strangers, the patience of those who had little, the laughter of children who had known sorrow. Tao began to write these lessons in a small book, one he carried close to his heart. He called it Seeds of the Heart. In its pages, he wrote, "A kind act may vanish from memory, but not from the world. The wind carries it to where it is needed." Years passed before Tao returned to his valley. His grandmother had long passed away, but her small house still stood by the river, surrounded by wildflowers. When the villagers saw him, they welcomed him like a son. He looked upon the fields and wept quietly, remembering all that had been lost and found. That evening, he sat by the river and opened his book. The moon reflected upon the water, the same moon that had shone over Nilan and Arun before him. "I have seen the cities," he whispered, "and I have seen the mountains. But the truest thing I have seen is this: the seed never forgets the hand that plants it." In the years that followed, Tao became a teacher, not through speech, but through example. He taught the children of the valley how to plant with care, how to speak gently, how to give without expecting return. When asked about karma, he would say, "It is not fate chasing you, but your own reflection walking beside you. Walk kindly, and the world will walk kindly with you." The people listened, and once again the valley thrived on through miracles. But through Mindfulness, when Tao grew old, he often sat by the river where his journey had begun. One evening, a young girl approached and asked, "Master, how can I know what seeds to plant?" He smiled. "Listen to your heart when it is quiet. Whatever brings peace to that stillness, plant that." She nodded, and he could see in her eyes the same spark of wonder that had once led him beyond the mountains. He knew that the story would continue, as it always had, like the flow of water that never stopped and never stayed the same. When he passed, the villagers placed his book, Seeds of the Heart, beside him. They said the pages smelled faintly of the earth, and that when the wind blew, they rustled like rice fields ready for harvest. And so, the story of karma lived on, not as a lesson written in stone, but as a song carried by the living, reminding all who heard it that every thought, every word, every deed ripples outward through time, returning at last as the very life we live. Long after Tao's passing, the valley became known not just for its fertile soil, but for its quiet wisdom. Travelers came from far and near to rest by the river, to hear the villagers speak of kindness as naturally as they spoke of weather. There were no temples made of marble or grand statues of Buddha carved into stone. Only the living temple of the land itself, the wind moving through the fields, the river murmuring its eternal chant, the people tending their crops with care and reverence. Yet time, as always, moved on, and new generations brought with them new desires, new doubts, and new lessons to be learned. Among those born in the valley was a boy named Ren, whose heart was restless and full of questions. He grew up hearing the stories of the farmers and monks who had lived before him, of Arun's compassion, Nilan's patience, and Tao's awakening. But to him, they felt like myths from another world. Ren admired their goodness, yet he could not understand how such peace was possible in a world so full of struggle. Karma may have worked for them, he would say, but life is different now. The world belongs to those who take, not those who give. His mother would only smile and reply, "The river still flows the same. Ren, you only have to listen." Ren's family was poor, though not desperate. His father tended a small field by the edge of the valley, and his mother wove baskets that were sold in nearby villages. Ren helped as much as he could, but inside him burned a hunger for something greater. He dreamed of the cities beyond the mountains, where gold glittered and opportunity waited. One day, after a quarrel with his father about money, Ren left the valley without saying goodbye. The mountains loomed high, but ambition pushed him onward. After many days of travel, he reached a town bustling with merchants, traders, and noise. It dazzled him, the colors, the crowds, the constant hum of buying and selling. For the first time, he felt the thrill of possibility. He found work with a trader who sold gems and spices. The man was clever and shrewd, quick to spot opportunity and quicker still to seize it. "Kindness is good for monks," he told Ren with a grin, "but kindness does not feed the belly. The world rewards those who act before others." At first, Ren hesitated, but soon he followed the man's example. He learned to haggle, to flatter, to twist truth just enough to gain advantage. His purse grew heavier, his clothes finer, and his heart more restless. Each night, as he counted his coins, he felt both triumph and unease. Something inside him whispered that he was sowing seeds that would not grow clean, but he silenced the thought. "The world is not the valley," he told himself. "Here, I must take or be taken." Years passed. Ren became wealthy, known in the city as a man of charm and success. Yet the peace he had sought always eluded him. He could not sleep without dreams of water, sometimes a river flooding through his hands, sometimes fields turning to dust. He ignored these dreams, believing them to be remnants of his old life. But karma, as quiet as the earth beneath the seed, was already moving. One year, a drought struck the region. The river that had once fed the trade routes dried to a trickle, and food became scarce. The poor grew desperate, and Ren's warehouses were filled with grain he had purchased cheaply before the shortage. His partners urged him to sell at high prices, to profit from the crisis. "You earned this," they said. "Why should you give it away?" And for a while, he agreed. But one evening, as he walked through the streets, he saw a woman kneeling beside her hungry child, offering him water because there was no food left. The child's eyes reminded him of his mother's. Something cracked within him then. He returned to his warehouse that night and ordered the doors opened. "Give to those who need it," he told his servants. "Do not take a single coin." They protested, but he was firm. All night he worked, handing out sacks of grain until the store was empty. By morning, word had spread through the city. Some called him foolish, others saintly. Ren felt only quiet exhaustion. He returned to his house and slept for the first time without dreams. When the rains finally came months later, Ren's wealth was gone, but the gratitude of the people remained. Strangers came to thank him, some bringing small gifts of food or cloth. He smiled, but he did not feel deserving. "I was only returning what was never mine," he told them. Yet karma, like the turning of seasons, had more to show him. One day, as he rested by the city gate, an old traveler approached. The man's clothes were dusty, but his eyes shone with calm. "I hear you gave away your fortune," the traveler said. "Do you regret it?" Ren hesitated. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I wonder what will become of me now." The old man smiled. "You have only begun your harvest. What you gave will not vanish. The world has a way of remembering kindness." He placed a small stone in Ren's hand, smooth, round, and cool. "Keep this," he said. "It will remind you that what you hold lightly will always stay with you." Then he walked away, leaving Ren to ponder his words. Years passed again. Ren lived simply, teaching others how to trade with fairness, how to earn without greed. His reputation for honesty spread, and though he had little, he never went hungry. The people who had once received his grain now brought him gifts from their harvests. Children waved when he passed, calling him Uncle Ren, and yet he often thought of the valley and the parents he had left behind. When he grew older, he decided to return. The road through the mountains felt longer than before, but as he walked, he carried the stone the old traveler had given him. When he reached the valley, the river was just as he remembered, calm, endless, full of light. His family's house stood by the edge of the field, its roof mended many times, its walls covered in climbing vines. His parents were gone, but their spirit lingered in the air, in the scent of the earth, in the hum of cicadas. The villagers welcomed him warmly, for though he had left long ago, they remembered his parents' kindness. Ren bowed deeply and said, "I have returned to tend what I once abandoned." He began to work the fields again, his hands soft from years of city life, but his heart eager to reconnect with the rhythm of the soil. The first time he pressed his palms into the dirt, he felt tears rise unbidden. "Forgive me," he whispered. "I thought I could outrun the earth." The soil, warm beneath his fingers, seemed to answer in silence. That night, as he watched the stars reflect in the river, he felt something inside him finally settle. Seasons turned, and the valley thrived once more. Ren taught the young ones how to plant with mindfulness, how to speak gratitude before harvest, how to give before taking. "The field listens," he told them. "It remembers not only what you do, but what you feel. Karma begins long before the seed touches the ground." Some of the children laughed, but others listened with wide eyes, their hearts stirred by the old truth made new again. One day, a storm swept through the valley, fierce and sudden. Trees bent, roofs cracked, and fields were flooded. When the villagers emerged from their homes, much of the harvest was lost. Fear crept among them, but Ren gathered them together. "The earth has taken what it needs," he said. "Now it is our turn to give back." They worked for weeks, rebuilding what was damaged, replanting what was lost, and slowly the valley healed. When the next harvest came, the crops were richer than any in memory. The people rejoiced, and Ren smiled quietly, knowing the balance had returned. He lived many years after that, long enough to see the children he had taught grow into kind farmers and wise parents. Before he died, he placed the smooth stone on the edge of the river. "May the current carry it to someone who needs it next," he said. The stone shimmered in the sunlight and then slipped gently beneath the surface, vanishing from sight. But the villagers said that sometimes on clear mornings. The river glowed faintly where the stone had sunk, as if reminding them that no act of kindness is ever lost. And so the story of Ren joined the long song of the valley, another verse in the endless hymn of karma. The fields grew, the river flowed, and the people continued to live by the simple wisdom passed down through generations, that what we give, we receive, that what we harm, we carry, and that the heart, like the earth, always returns what it is given. And through it all, the valley remained a place where kindness took root as easily as the rain, and the air itself seemed to whisper to every soul who came to rest beside the water, "What you plant within yourself is what the world will one day return." The story of the valley continued like the song of the river, soft and unbroken, carrying the memory of those who had lived and learned before. As time passed, generations changed, and the rhythm of the world outside grew louder, faster, and filled with new desires. Traders came with machines that could plow fields in a fraction of the time. Merchants brought bright fabrics and strange tools, and the young began to dream of the cities beyond the mountains. Yet beneath all this change, the earth remained the same, patient, listening, waiting for those who remembered how to listen back. Among the new children of the valley was a girl named Lena, whose heart was tender and filled with curiosity. She grew up hearing the stories of Arun, Nilan, Tao, and Ren, and though she loved the tales, she did not fully believe them. "How can kindness change the world?" she asked her grandmother. "How can something invisible like karma shape what happens to us?" Her grandmother smiled, her voice slow and gentle like the wind through bamboo. "You cannot see the wind either, child, but you can feel it move the leaves. Karma is the same, it moves through what we do, through how we love." Lena helped her parents tend their small field by the river. She was quick to learn, yet her mind often wandered to distant dreams. She wanted to see the world, to study, to understand things beyond the valley's simplicity. When she was 16, a teacher from the nearby town came to visit, offering lessons to any child who wished to learn. Lena begged her parents to let her go. They agreed, though her mother said quietly, "The farther you go, the more you must remember what roots you." Lena promised she would never forget. Life in the town was unlike anything she had known. The streets were full of noise, people hurried everywhere, and every day felt like a race she could not see the finish of. Her teacher spoke of science, philosophy, and progress. He taught her that the world was built on cause and effect, but he never used the word karma. "We must make our own future," he said. "Hard work brings results, not superstition." Lena admired his intelligence, yet sometimes, when she sat by her window at night, she missed the sound of the river and her grandmother's stories. She told herself she was foolish to miss them. Still, her heart felt emptier than before. Years passed, and Lena grew into a skilled scholar. She began to teach at the same school where she had studied, and her words inspired many. But with success came exhaustion. Her days were full of tasks, her mind full of worries, and her heart quietly longing for something she could not name. She had forgotten how to sit in silence, how to breathe without rushing, how to feel the simple joy of being alive. Then one spring, news reached her that her grandmother had fallen ill. Without hesitation, Lena left the town and returned to the valley. When she arrived, the air felt different still, calm, as if waiting for her. Her grandmother lay in bed, frail but smiling. "You've grown wise," she whispered, "but have you grown peaceful?" Lena bowed her head and said nothing. Her grandmother reached out and took her hand. "Do you still believe the world has no ears to hear your kindness?" she asked. Lena shook her head slowly. I don't know what I believe anymore, she said. I teach my students that effort brings results, but I feel as if I'm always chasing something that moves further away. Her grandmother's eyes softened. Then you are ready to listen again. For the next few weeks, Lena stayed in the valley, caring for her grandmother and walking the familiar fields each morning. The earth felt different under her feet, warmer, more alive. One day, she noticed a patch of flowers blooming by the river, though no one had planted them. When she asked the villagers, they said they grow from the same place where Neelan was buried long ago. We call them the blossoms of karma. That night, as she sat by the fire, she thought about those words. If love and kindness could linger in the earth for generations, perhaps they were not myths after all. Her grandmother passed quietly one evening. Her last words a whisper. Whatever you give returns. Live gently, and the world will hold you gently. Lena wept beside her bed, but her grief was not only sorrow, it was awakening. She realized how much her grandmother's love had shaped her life, how every gentle word, every story told beneath the lamp, had planted seeds that now bloomed within her. After the funeral, she decided to stay longer. She tended the small field herself, feeling each grain of soil between her fingers. One afternoon, as she worked, a young boy from the village approached and asked, "Teacher, will you go back to the city?" Lena smiled faintly. "Not yet," she said. "The city will wait. The earth needs to teach me something first." Days turned into months, and the valley slowly began to heal something in her heart. She found comfort in small things, the shimmer of sunlight on water, the call of birds, the laughter of children chasing dragonflies. When people came to her with their troubles, she listened. She no longer offered the quick answers she used to give her students. Instead, she asked them questions that helped them find their own truth. "If you plant anger, what will grow?" she would ask softly. "And if you plant patience?" Her words spread through the valley, and people began to seek her guidance. Some called her the teacher of two worlds, for she spoke both the language of reason and the language of the heart. One day, a great storm swept across the valley. The river overflowed, and the fields were damaged. Many villagers lost their crops. They gathered in fear, asking, "Why must this happen again? We have done no harm." Lena stood before them, calm as the still water after rain. "Do not think of this as punishment," she said. "The storm is not against us, is part of the same breath that gives us life. When the earth changes, she reminds us that we too must change. Let us plant again, and plant with gratitude." The people listened, and though their hearts were heavy, they followed her lead. Together, they replanted the fields, repaired the houses, and shared what food remained. Months later, when the harvest came, it was more abundant than any they could remember. The villagers gathered around Lena and said, "Your words have become the rain." She smiled and replied, "No, they were always yours. I only reminded you of the seeds you already carried." As the years passed, Lena grew old. Her hair turned silver like the mist over the river, her steps slowed, but her spirit grew brighter. She wrote down the stories she had learned, the tale of the kind farmer Arun, of Nilan and Tao, of Ren's return, and of the blossoms that grew without being planted. She called her book The Circle of Seeds. When it was finished, she placed it in the temple by the river so that travelers might read it and rest their minds. One evening, as she sat by the river, watching the last light fade, she whispered, "I have finally learned that karma is not only what happens to us, but what happens through us. The world is always writing itself with our hands. That night, Lena fell asleep under the open sky and never woke again. The villagers found her the next morning, her face peaceful, her hands folded upon her chest. Beside her lay a single flower, freshly bloomed, though no other flowers grew nearby. They took it as a sign that her spirit had joined the great garden of life that connects all beings. From then on, whenever the wind passed through the valley, the villagers said it carried her voice, whispering the same words her grandmother once told her: "Whatever you give returns. Live gently, and the world will hold you gently." And so the valley remained a living testament to the law that had guided it for generations. The stories of kindness and consequence continued to shape those who listened. Children grew up learning that their actions were not isolated moments, but part of an unending weave connecting all life. When asked what karma meant, the elders would point to the river and say that the river never forgets its source, yet it keeps moving forward. So should we. And in this way, even as the world beyond grew busier and louder, the valley held its quiet wisdom teaching through rain and sun, through joy and sorrow, that in every breath, every thought, every act of love or cruelty, we are all planting something that will one day bloom in the garden of our lives. Many decades passed, and the story of Lena became another gentle thread in the long fabric of the valley's memory. Her book, The Circle of Seeds, was kept in the small temple near the river, its pages worn by the touch of countless travelers who came seeking peace. Time, as it always did, moved quietly onward. The world outside the valley had changed beyond recognition machines, replaced hands. Cities grew like forests of light, and people began to live faster, chasing dreams that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Yet in the valley, the rhythm of life still followed the flow of the river. The people rose with the sun, worked with patience, and spoke softly of the old teachings that had shaped them for centuries. They still believed that the earth remembered, that the heart echoed what it gave, and that the unseen law of karma wove through everything like breath through life. In this valley, generations after Lena, there was born a young man named Soma. He was curious and kind, but unlike the others. He felt torn between two worlds, the quiet simplicity of his home and the restless pulse of the world beyond. His mother often told him stories of the past, of farmers who forgave, teachers who taught through silence, and travelers who discovered wisdom through loss. Soma loved those stories, yet he felt something missing. If karma is so real, he asked one evening, why can't we see it? Why do we speak of it as if it's a ghost? His mother smiled gently. Because karma is not meant to be seen, she said. It is meant to be felt. When your heart trembles with kindness or regret, that is karma moving through you. But Soma wanted more than feeling. He wanted proof. He wanted to see the law of cause and effect unfold before his eyes. When he turned 20, he decided to leave the valley and travel the world. His mother, though sad, understood. The seed must leave the tree to find its own soil, she said. But remember, wherever you go, you are always planting. Soma promised to return and set off with a small pack, a walking stick, and a heart full of questions. He traveled through bustling cities where people barely noticed each other, through deserts where silence stretched wider than thought, and through villages where laughter and poverty lived side by side. Everywhere he went, he looked for signs of karma, for justice, for balance, for the invisible hand that guided life. What he found instead was confusion. He saw good people suffer, liars prosper, and cruelty disguised as strength. His heart grew heavy. One evening, weary from travel, he stopped by a roadside inn. At a nearby table sat a group of merchants boasting about their wealth. One of them mocked a beggar outside who had asked for food. Soma felt anger stir within him. "How can you laugh at someone's hunger?" he said. The merchant sneered. "Why should I care? Everyone gets what they deserve. If karma is real, the beggar must have done something to earn his misery." Soma fell silent. The man's words stung because they twisted the truth he was trying to understand. That night, unable to sleep, Soma went outside and found the beggar still sitting under a tree. Without speaking, he handed him his meal. The old man smiled faintly and whispered, "You've fed me before." Soma blinked, startled. "I don't know you." The man's eyes shimmered with strange light. "Not in this life," he said, and then closed his eyes, falling into peaceful sleep. Soma watched him for a long time, the weight of the moment sinking deep into his heart. Days later, Soma reached a mountain monastery. He stayed there for a time, seeking wisdom from the monks who lived in silence and prayer. One of them, an old teacher named Kavi, took interest in him. "You have the eyes of a seeker," he said one day as they walked through the gardens. "But you look outward when you should be looking inward." Soma frowned. "How can karma be inside me when it moves through the world?" Kavi picked up a fallen leaf and held it out. "This leaf did not choose to fall," he said, "but the wind moved it, and the tree let it go. Karma is not outside or inside, is the space between the wind and the leaf, the meeting of cause and moment. When you understand that, you will no longer search for proof." Soma stayed with Kavi for several months, meditating, tending the gardens, and learning the quiet art of observation. Slowly, he began to see how everything responded to everything else. The way the rain coaxed life from the soil. The way a kind word softened a stranger's eyes. The way silence could heal what argument could not. When he finally left the monastery, his heart was lighter, though his understanding still felt incomplete. He traveled again, this time not searching but witnessing. In a coastal town, he helped a fisherman repair his nets. In another village, he comforted a widow who had lost her husband to the sea. Each act seemed small, yet he began to notice how his presence changed things. People smiled more, helped one another, shared what they had. It was as if his kindness echoed outward, touching lives he would never see. And sometimes, when he felt tired or lost, a stranger would appear to help him. Farmer offering fruit, a child sharing laughter, a woman singing softly in a market. Slowly, he began to realize that these moments were not accidents. They were the gentle return of the seeds he had planted along the way. Years passed, and Soma grew older. His travels had taken him far from home, yet the memory of the valley never faded. He longed to see the river again, to walk barefoot through the fields, to hear the whispers of wind in the rice. When he finally returned, he found the valley changed yet familiar. The houses were rebuilt, the people younger, but the same peace lingered in the air. He visited the temple by the river and found Lena's book still there, its pages fragile but preserved. As he read, he felt her words move through him like the river through soil. "The world is always writing itself with our hands," she had written. He smiled, realizing that every person before him had added their verse to the same story. Soma spent his remaining years teaching the children of the valley. He told them not to fear karma as punishment or hope for it as reward. "It is simply the way the universe breathes," he said. Every breath in brings consequence. Every breath out gives creation. The two are one. He encouraged them to plant trees they might never sit under, to forgive even when it felt undeserved, and to see their lives as gardens that would outlast them. Some of the children understood, others didn't, but he never forced belief. You don't need to believe in karma, he told them. You only need to live gently and watch what grows. As he grew weaker with age, Soma spent his days by the river, watching the sunlight dance on the water. One morning, a young girl brought him a small sapling she had grown from a seed. "I want to plant this near the river," she said. "Will it grow?" Soma smiled and nodded. "If you give it care, it will grow beyond both of us." Together they planted it, pressing their hands into the cool soil. "What should I name it?" she asked. Soma thought for a moment and said, "Call it patience. For every good thing begins with waiting." That night, he dreamed of the valley covered in trees, their roots intertwined beneath the earth, their branches reaching toward the stars. He saw the faces of those who had come before Ruin Nelon, Tao, Ren, Linawal, standing by the river, smiling. He felt no fear, only peace. When morning came, Soma did not wake. The villagers found him seated beneath the sapling, his eyes closed, his hands resting gently on his knees. They buried him there, beside the river that had guided so many lives. Over the years, the sapling grew into a great tree whose shade covered the path to the temple. Travelers would often stop beneath it to rest, unaware that they were sitting in the shadow of patience. The tree planted by the man who had sought proof of karma and found it not in miracles, but in the quiet continuity of love. The people of the valley continued to teach their children what Soma had taught them, that every act, no matter how small, sends ripples through the universe, and that the way to live is to plant beauty where there could be bitterness, to sow compassion where there could be indifference. And so, the valley thrived, untouched by the noise of the changing world, a living reflection of the truth that had been spoken since time immemorial, that karma is not the hand of fate, but the gentle unfolding of our own hearts. And each night, as the river flowed under the starlight, it whispered to all who cared to listen, "What you give will always return. The only question is what you choose to give." Generations after Soma's time, the valley had grown even more beautiful, as though every act of kindness that had ever been sown there had taken root in the earth itself. The river moved with its ancient calm, carrying light and memory through its current, while the fields shimmered like gold beneath the sun. Travelers often said that when they entered the valley, something within them softened, that their worries seemed to dissolve into the air, that even their breathing became slower. The people who lived there still spoke of karma, but no longer as a distant law or invisible judgment. They spoke of it as something intimate, as natural as the turning of seasons, the rising of dawn, or the quiet sigh of dusk. They lived with the deep knowing that what one gives is never lost, that even a single smile could ripple through generations. But time, patient as always, continued its work of teaching, for even in the most peaceful places, there must be new hearts that forget and remember again. Among the children of that new era was a boy named An, the great-grandson of the girl who had planted the tree called Patience. Ian grew up in the valley surrounded by laughter and warmth, but he was not like other children. Where they saw harmony, he saw repetition. Where they found joy in the rhythm of daily life, he felt confined by it. He admired the valley's peace, but secretly wondered if it was only ignorance disguised as wisdom. "If everyone only plants kindness," he said once to his father, Doesn't the world grow dull?" His father chuckled and replied, "When you have seen enough storms, you will learn to love calm skies." But Ayan was young, restless, and curious. He longed to see the world beyond the mountains, to taste adventure, to carve his own path rather than inherit one. When he turned 20, he left the valley with the blessings of his family and the promise that he would one day return. The world outside dazzled him at first. He saw cities that glittered with towers of glass, heard music that never stopped, met people whose eyes shone with ambition and desire. There was a thrill to it all, the kind that made his heart race. For a while, he forgot the quiet rhythm of the valley. He worked as a trader, learning how to bargain, how to speak with charm, how to earn wealth through wit and speed. Success came quickly, and he felt proud of his cleverness. Yet beneath the glittering surface, he began to notice something hollow. The people he met smiled with their lips, but not their eyes. Everyone seemed to be taking from everyone else, calling it competition, calling it survival. When he asked one of his new friends why things were this way, the man laughed and said, "Because life is a market, my boy. You take what you can before someone else takes it from you. That's not greed, that's nature." Ayan nodded but felt uneasy. He told himself that the valley's teachings were old-fashioned, that karma was a story meant to comfort the weak. Yet as months turned into years, something in him began to crack. His wealth grew, but so did his emptiness. He could buy comfort but not sleep, pleasure but not joy. One evening, after a profitable deal that left another merchant in ruin, Ayan walked through the crowded streets and felt as though every light in the city glared at him. He ducked into an alley to escape the noise and found a small boy crying beside a broken cart. His leg was injured, his face streaked with dirt. Ayan hesitated, his instinct telling him to walk away. But then he remembered something his grandmother once told him. The smallest act of compassion can silence the loudest regret. He knelt and bandaged the boy's leg with his scarf, helped him to his feet, and gave him money to get home. The boy looked up at him and smiled a small, pure smile that pierced something deep inside Ayan. For the first time in years, he felt lightness in his chest. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about the boy's smile. He wondered if perhaps kindness was not weakness but freedom. In the days that followed, he began to notice things he had long ignored: the beggars on the corners, the tired eyes of the workers, the loneliness hidden behind laughter. He started helping quietly, buying meals for the hungry, paying debts for strangers, giving without asking. Each time he did, the heaviness inside him lifted a little more. Yet one morning, he woke to find that his wealth had vanished. A trusted partner had betrayed him, stealing his money and fleeing the city. For a moment, rage burned in him. He wanted to curse the man, to chase him down. But as he stared at the empty ledgers, he suddenly began to laugh. "So this is the harvest," he said softly. "The seed I once planted returning to me." He felt no hatred, only a strange calm. He realized then that the pain he felt was not punishment, but purification, washing away the greed that had bound him. With nothing left to hold him in the city, Ayan began to wander. He traveled on foot, sleeping under the stars, eating whatever kindness brought his way. In every village he passed, he met people who taught him something without meaning. To a farmer who shared food with strangers, a child who gave away his toy, an old woman who smiled though she had little. He began to see karma everywhere, not as fate, but as the invisible web connecting all hearts. Each act of love or cruelty tugged at that web, shaping lives in ways no one could predict. He saw that even suffering had its place, for it humbled pride and deepened compassion. One winter, he reached a mountain town covered in snow. There he met a widow named Lian, who lived alone, spinning wool to survive. She welcomed him into her home when he had nowhere else to go, sharing her food and fire. In return, he helped her gather wood and fix her roof. They lived quietly together for several months, neither asking much of the other. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lian said, "I once had a son who left to seek fortune. He never returned. Sometimes I wonder if kindness travels through time, if somewhere he receives the warmth I give to others." Ian looked into the flames and whispered, "It does. Everything we give finds its way home." When spring came, Ian prepared to leave. Lian gave him a small bundle of food and said, "If you ever return to your home, plant something for me by your river." He promised he would. He walked for many weeks until one morning he stood again at the edge of the valley. The sight took his breath away. The fields shimmered, the air carried the scent of jasmine, and the great tree called Patience stood tall by the river, its branches wide as a sheltering sky. He fell to his knees and wept not from sorrow but from the deep, wordless relief of returning to the beginning. The villagers welcomed him, though many had never heard his name. He told them he was a traveler seeking peace, and they let him stay. Each morning he worked beside them in the fields, his hands learning once again the language of soil. When asked what he had done before, he smiled and said only, "I was a man learning how to plant again, in time." He built a small house by the river and planted a sapling nearby. Just as he had promised Lian, he tended it carefully, watering it with the same devotion he once gave to his ambitions. Years passed, and the sapling grew into a strong tree that shaded his home. Beneath it, children would often play, and travelers would rest. Some said that when the wind blew through its leaves, it sounded like a woman's laughter. Ian would smile then, thinking of the widow and the warmth she had given him when he grew old. Ian became known as the quiet sage of the valley. People came to ask for advice, expecting profound teachings, but he always said the same simple thing: karma is not about destiny, it is about intimacy. It lives in every glance, every gesture, every breath. You do not need to believe in it. You are already living it. They would leave puzzled at first, but later, when life showed them its gentle balance, they would understand. Ian died peacefully one night, sitting under the tree he had planted, his face turned toward the sound of the river. The villagers buried him there, beside Patience, where two trees now stood side by side, their roots intertwined. Over the years, the people began to call them the twin trees of karma. They said one represented cause and the other effect, each feeding the other through the soil. When the wind blew, their branches moved together like hands in prayer. Travelers who passed through the valley would stop to rest beneath them, feeling a quiet peace they could not explain. And the people of the valley, remembering all the lives that had come before, would whisper to one another, "Every action is a seed, and every heart is a garden. Tend yours well, for what you plant today will shade someone tomorrow." And so, the teaching of karma continued and changed, unending, alive in every breath of wind, in every kindness offered, in every soul who learned, forgot, and learned again that nothing we give is ever lost, and that life, like the river, always finds its way home. The twin trees by the river became the heart of the valley, standing like two quiet guardians over the generations that came after. Their branches reached high into the sky, touching the sunlight, and their roots delved deep into the earth, touching the memory of those who had lived before. The villagers said that the trees whispered to each other when the wind passed through, telling stories of cause and effect, of kindness and consequence, of the endless flow of life returning to itself. They had become symbols, not of law or judgment, but of continuity, reminders that all things were connected, that even the smallest seed could one day cast a great shadow. Children played beneath them, lovers met there to promise their hearts, elders sat in their shade to meditate. The sound of the river beside them was like a heartbeat, steady and eternal. One day, a boy named Kale was born in the valley. From his earliest years, he was drawn to the river and the twin trees, while other children chased one another through the fields. Kale would sit beneath the trees and listen, convinced that he could hear them speak. He did not understand their words, but their murmur filled him with peace. His parents often found him asleep at their roots, his small hand pressed against the soil as if feeling the pulse of the world. As he grew older, he began asking questions that no one could answer. Why do good people die young? He asked his mother one day. Why do bad men sometimes live long and happy lives? She smiled gently and said, "Life is not a punishment or a reward, Kale. It is a river. Sometimes the water is calm, sometimes it is stormy, but it always flows to the same sea." Kale pondered this, but something inside him wanted to understand more deeply. He wanted to see how karma worked, how the invisible thread of actions wove through the tapestry of life. When he came of age, Kale began studying the old stories of the valley. He read Lena's Circle of Seeds, he listened to the tales of Ayen and Soma, and he learned of the farmers and wanderers whose lives had shaped the valley's spirit. The more he learned, the more he felt a quiet longing awaken in him, a desire, not only to know karma, but to live it fully. So he began to dedicate his days to serving others. He helped repair roofs, carried water for the elderly, and taught children to read beneath the shade of the twin trees. He worked not for recognition, but for the simple joy it brought him. Yet even as he gave, he sometimes felt doubt. There were moments when people he helped betrayed him or spoke ill of him behind his back. Moments when his kindness seemed to vanish like rain on dry ground. How can this be the law of karma? He asked the river one evening, "If every seed bears fruit, where is the harvest of love?" That night, he dreamed of walking through a vast field filled with seeds scattered across the soil. Some sprouted quickly, others lay dormant beneath the earth. A voice spoke softly from the wind, "Not every seed grows in the same season. Some take years, some lifetimes. Your task is only to sow." When he awoke, he felt lighter. He began to understand that karma was not a trade of fairness, but a cycle of creation. It was not about receiving what one expected, but about continuing to plant goodness, regardless of return. From that day on, Kale stopped measuring his actions by outcome. He worked with quiet joy, helping, forgiving, and teaching without needing gratitude. And slowly, he began to see how even small acts rippled outward. A kind word would soften a harsh heart. A moment of patience would calm a quarrel before it began. He realized that karma was not always visible in grand gestures. It was most alive in the gentle, unseen moments between people. Years passed, and Kale became known as the listener of the river. Travelers who passed through the valley often sought his counsel, though he rarely gave advice. Instead, he would sit with them in silence by the water until they found their own answers. One evening, a stranger arrived, woman weary from travel, her clothes torn by wind and dust. She told Kale she had fled a war-torn land where hatred had consumed her home. "I lost everything," she said bitterly. "If karma is real, why did the innocent die while the cruel survived?" Kale looked at her with compassion and said, "The river does not choose who drinks from it. It simply flows. But those who drink with gratitude find peace even in sorrow." The woman frowned. "Peace will not bring back my family." Kale nodded. "No, but peace will stop their loss from multiplying. When we carry hatred forward, we become the next cause of suffering. Karma does not end until forgiveness begins." She stayed in the valley for many months, helping in the fields, learning the rhythm of quiet life. In time, her grief softened. One morning, she said to Kale, "I am leaving now, but I will take your words with me. Perhaps I will plant something where my home once stood." He smiled. "Then the river flows with you." When she departed, Kale felt a deep peace, knowing that her healing would ripple outward, touching lives he would never see. As the years turned, Kale grew old. His hair turned white, his hands became thin and lined. Yet his eyes still carried the same calm light that had once reflected the river. He spent his final days sitting beneath the twin trees, writing his thoughts on small pieces of parchment that he left in a box at the temple. "Let them be leaves for those who seek shade," he wrote. His final message read, "Karma is not the hand of the gods, is the breath of the earth. It moves through you, through me, through every stone and wave. To live well is to breathe with it, not against it." When he passed, the villagers found him beneath the trees, his body still, his face serene. They buried him where he had sat, placing a small wooden carving of the river beside him. In the years that followed, a new tradition began. Every spring, the people of the valley gathered by the twin trees to tell stories of those who had lived before, of kindness returned in unexpected ways, of forgiveness that had healed generations, of small acts that had changed the course of lives. Children grew up hearing these stories not as legends but as gentle truths. The valley became known as the Garden of Karma, a place where people came to remember that life's every breath carried consequence, that nothing given in love was ever lost. Travelers from faraway lands brought their burdens there and left lighter, their hearts soothed by the sound of the river and the whisper of the trees. One day, a scholar from a distant city arrived, hoping to write about the valley's mysterious peace. He asked the villagers how such harmony had been sustained for so many centuries. An old woman smiled and said, "We do not protect peace. We practice it. Every morning when we wake, we ask, 'What am I planting today?' That is all." The scholar was puzzled. "But surely there must be rules, rituals, teachings." The woman laughed softly. "The river teaches us everything we need to know. Watch it, and you will understand karma." The scholar stayed for a month, observing, listening, trying to find the secret behind the valley's serenity. In the end, he found none only the simple kindness of people who lived without haste, who forgave quickly and shared easily. When he left, he wrote in his journal, "There is no miracle in the valley, only the ordinary perfection of cause and effect. The people live as though they are part of the river, and in doing so, they have become the river itself." Centuries later, long after names and faces had faded, the valley still existed, untouched by the chaos of the changing world. The twin trees still stood, though their branches had grown immense and their roots intertwined so deeply that they had become one. The villagers said that when the wind blew through them, The sound was not two voices, but one, whispering of unity and return. The river still flowed, carrying its eternal song. And every child born in the valley grew up knowing the truth that had sustained it for generations, that we are all sowers and harvesters, planting each moment into the soil of eternity. And though no one remembered who first spoke it, the valley's song continued through every life, through every ripple of water, through every breath that passed from one generation to the next. Whatever you plant in the heart will bloom in the world. Plant gently, and your world will be kind. The valley endured like a timeless breath between mountains, its rhythm unbroken even as centuries folded quietly into one another. The twin trees by the river had grown enormous, their canopies blending into a single ocean of green that shimmered with light and shadow. Beneath them, the soil was soft and dark, rich with the memory of those who had lived, loved, and passed before. The villagers said that every root was a story, every leaf a prayer. Life in the valley remained simple, guided by the same wisdom whispered through the generations, that whatever one planted in thought, word, or deed would someday return, not as punishment or reward, but as reflection. Children still gathered beneath the trees to hear stories from the elders, who spoke not of gods or miracles, but of people who had learned to live gently. The law of karma, they said, is not about waiting for justice. It is about learning how to create peace in every moment. Among the new generation was a young girl named Suri. She was bright, curious, and full of dreams that stretched far beyond the borders of the valley. Her mother worked the fields, her father crafted wooden tools, and their lives moved with the steady patience of the seasons. But Suri's mind was restless. She loved her home, yet she longed to understand the wider world, the cities she had only heard about, the machines that could move without horses, the people who could speak to others across oceans. Sometimes she sat by the river, gazing at her reflection and wondering if she was meant for something more than this quiet, predictable life. One evening, as the sun melted into the hills, she asked her grandfather, "If karma always brings back what we give, why does the world outside seem so unkind?" He smiled, his face wrinkled like the bark of the trees. "Because people forget, child. They plant without thinking. They sow fear, greed, and anger without realizing the soil listens. The world is not cruel, it is echoing what we give it." Those words stayed with her. She began to pay attention to small things, the way people spoke to one another, how a harsh word could wilt a smile, how a simple gesture of kindness could brighten a day. She started helping her neighbors without being asked, carrying water for the elderly, sharing food with children who had less. And though her acts were small, they rippled quietly through the valley. People began smiling more, quarreling less. It was as if the air itself had grown softer. Yet, like all lessons, Suri's understanding would be tested. One year, a drought came. The river thinned, the crops withered, and worry crept into every home. The villagers prayed, but the sky remained silent. Fear grew, and with it, suspicion. Some began to hoard food, others accused their neighbors of taking more than their share. Old friendships cracked under the weight of hunger. Suri tried to help where she could, sharing what her family had, comforting those who despaired. But one night, her family's storehouse was broken into, and nearly all their grain was stolen. Her father was furious. "We give and give," he said bitterly, "and this is what we receive. Tell me, Suri, where is your karma now?" She said nothing, her heart torn between pain and faith. That night, she went to the river, knelt at its edge, and whispered, "If giving brings loss, how do I keep believing?" The river made no sound but its gentle murmur, yet, as she listened, she began to feel something settle inside her deep, wordless knowing that kindness was not a transaction but a choice. The next morning, she gathered what little rice they had left and cooked it. When her parents awoke, she told them she was taking it to the widow who lived alone at the edge of the valley. Her father protested, but she smiled and said, "We still have each other. She has no one." Her mother touched her cheek and said quietly, "Go then, and may the river walk with you." When Suri reached the widow's home, she found the old woman sitting silently, her eyes hollow with hunger. Without a word, Suri placed the bowl before her. The woman took her hand and whispered, "You have just fed your future." Weeks passed, and the drought finally broke. Rain fell in silver sheets, soaking the earth, reviving the fields. The villagers rejoiced, but for Suri's family, the harvest was poor. They had planted late and lost much. Still, they found enough to live, and slowly life returned to normal. One day, a stranger arrived in the Valia merchant from a distant land. He sought a place to rest, and Suri's family offered him shelter. When he saw their kindness, he smiled and said, "The rain washed away my wagons and goods, but I still have something to give." From his bag, he pulled out a handful of rare seeds. "Plant these," he said. "They come from far away, from a place where the soil breathes light." Suri took them with gratitude, and her family planted them in the small patch behind their house. Within weeks, delicate green shoots appeared, unlike any the villagers had seen. By the end of the season, the plants bore fruits sweet and golden, enough to feed many. Her father, astonished, turned to Suri and whispered, "You were right. The world returns what we give." As the years passed, Suri grew into a woman known for her calm and generosity. Travelers who came to the valley often sought her advice. She would sit by the twin trees and listen to their stories, guiding them not with doctrine but with quiet questions. "What are you planting?" she would ask. "What do you wish to harvest?" Some found comfort, others confusion, but all left with lighter hearts. One day, a young man from the city arrived, full of arrogance and disbelief. "I've heard of your valley," he said. "They say karma lives here, but I see only superstition. The world rewards the strong, not the kind." Suri looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. "Tell me, what happens when you shout into the mountains?" "It echoes," he said impatiently. "Exactly," she replied. "That is karma. The mountain does not decide what to return. It simply gives back your voice." He frowned but said nothing more. That night, he stayed in the valley. In the morning, as he prepared to leave, he noticed the villagers sharing their food with travelers, laughing despite their simple lives. He watched an old man give his coat to a stranger, a child helping another tie his sandals. For reasons he could not explain, his chest ached. Before departing, he left behind his purse of gold, saying only, "Perhaps this will grow better here." When Suri grew old, she often sat beneath the twin trees, watching the children play. The sound of their laughter mingled with the river's song, creating a melody that seemed eternal. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, she felt her heart grow still. She closed her eyes and whispered, "May my kindness keep moving." She passed quietly, her face serene. The next morning, the villagers found that the twin trees had shed all their leaves overnight. The river, however, shimmered brighter than ever. They buried Suri beneath the trees, placing in her hand a single seed from the golden fruit she had once grown. Seasons turned, and from that seed grew a new sapling between the twin trees, its leaves silver green and radiant under moonlight. The villagers called it the third tree of karma, saying it represented the heart, the bridge between cause and effect, the living reminder that every act begins within. The valley became a sanctuary for wanderers once more, and its story continued to ripple outward like the river's flow, reaching lands that had forgotten stillness, reminding the world that peace was not found in avoiding pain but in understanding its purpose. And though the names of those who had carried the teaching faded into time, the truth remained alive, carried in the voices of those who still listened to the wind in the trees, still believed that the soil remembers, and still planted seeds of compassion with every breath. Even now, when the moon rises above the mountains and the river gleams like silver silk, travelers who walk through the valley say they can hear a faint whisper in the wind, the voice of the earth itself, speaking in the language of patience, balance, and love. It says, "Every thought is a seed, every action a root, and every life a garden. Tend yours with care, and you will never fear what grows." And those who listen deeply enough understand that the valley is not a place, is a state of being. The inner landscape where all beings learn, again and again, that what we give to the world is what the world becomes. The valley rested beneath the soft embrace of dawn, its mist rising like breath from a sleeping world. The river shimmered, alive with the first light, and the three great trees by its edge stood silent and radiant, their roots tangled deep within the same earth, their branches woven together as if in eternal conversation. Generations had come and gone beneath their shade, and yet the spirit of the place remained untouched, timeless, and whole. People still called it the Garden of Karma, though few remembered the origins of the name. For most, it was simply home, a place where life flowed with quiet harmony, where the rhythm of giving and receiving was as natural as the turning of the seasons. The people of the valley no longer spoke often of karma. They did not need to. It had become the air they breathed, the way they lived, the understanding woven into every glance and gesture. Among the new generation was a boy named Aaron, whose curiosity mirrored the river's flow. He loved to ask questions, endless streams of them, about the trees, the wind, and the stories whispered by the elders. Who planted the first seed? He once asked his grandmother. She smiled and pointed toward the horizon. No one remembers, child. Perhaps the earth planted itself. Her answer fascinated him, and as he grew, he spent long hours beneath the trees, watching the play of sunlight through their leaves, listening to the murmur of the river as though it held the voice of truth itself. When he grew older, he began to wonder if the law of karma still held its power in a world that was changing so quickly. Beyond the mountains, the cities had grown vast and loud, filled with machines and lights that burned through the night. He often heard travelers speak of a new world where people no longer believed in unseen things, where they sought progress instead of peace, wealth instead of wisdom. Aaron listened and felt both wonder and unease. What happens, he asked his grandmother one evening, if people forget the law of karma? She gazed at the glowing horizon and said, "The river never stops flowing, even when no one listens to its song." Karma is not a belief, Aaron. It is simply the way the world breathes. As he entered his youth, Aaron grew restless. He longed to see the world beyond the valley, to understand how the old truths lived or died beyond its borders. His grandmother gave him her blessing, placing a small pouch of rice in his hands. "Take this," she said. When you share it, the river will know you still carry home in your heart. With that, he set out at dawn, his shadow stretching long behind him as he followed the winding road through the mountains. The world outside was both dazzling and disorienting. He saw cities of metal and glass, where people hurried past one another with eyes fixed on glowing screens. He saw factories that roared like storms, their smoke hiding the sky. He saw wealth piled high in towers and poverty crouching in alleys beneath them. Yet even in this restless world, he found moments of beauty. A woman feeding stray birds, a child offering his umbrella to an old man in the rain, a stranger smiling at another for no reason. In those moments, he recognized the same law that guided his valley, the quiet, invisible echo of cause and effect. Aaron found work as a gardener in a city park. He cared for flowers that bloomed among concrete, trimming and watering them while the sound of cars and voices roared around him. Each morning, he scattered a handful of the rice his grandmother had given him onto the soil, whispering a small prayer. May this grow where peace is needed. Over time, the park became a small oasis in the chaos of the city. People who passed through began to linger longer, to sit, to breathe. Some brought their children to play, others came to rest after long days. And though they did not know why, they felt lighter there, as though the air itself carried kindness. One day, a woman approached Aaron while he was tending the garden. "What is your secret?" she asked. "How do you make this place feel so calm?" Aaron smiled and said, "There is no secret. The plants grow because they are cared for. People are the same." As years went by, the city continued to grow, and so did Aaron's garden. It became known as the Garden of Echoes, a place where people came not only for beauty, but for quiet reflection. Yet not everyone appreciated it. One day, the land was sold to developers who planned to build a shopping district there. Aaron pleaded for them to reconsider, but they laughed. "This is progress," they said. "The world doesn't need more trees, needs more profit." For the first time, Aaron felt despair. He watched as workers arrived with machines to tear down the garden he had nurtured for decades. But something strange happened. The night before the construction was to begin, a great storm swept through the city. The rain fell so fiercely that the machines sank into the mud, and the workers could not proceed for days. When the storm cleared, the garden still stood, drenched but alive, the flowers blooming brighter than before. Some said it was luck. Others called it coincidence. Aaron only smiled quietly, thinking of the river back home. "The earth remembers kindness," he whispered. "She protects what has been given to her." The developers abandoned their plans, and the city declared the garden a public sanctuary. People from all walks of life came to visit, bringing offerings of seeds and stories. Aaron grew old tending that garden, teaching anyone who would listen about balance, patience, and respect. He told them that karma was not something to fear, that it was not about divine punishment or cosmic reward, but about relationship, the living dialogue between action and consequence. "The world," he said, "is always speaking back to us. The question is, are we listening?" When his final years came, Aaron decided to return to the valley. His body was frail, but his spirit strong. He carried with him a small pouch of seeds gathered from his city garden, flowers that had grown in the heart of noise and concrete. When he reached the valley after so many years, tears filled his eyes. The twin trees and their younger sibling still stood by the river, vast and magnificent. The air smelled of rain and jasmine, and the sound of the water wrapped around him like a memory. The villagers welcomed him as if he had never left. That evening, he stood beneath the 3 trees and scattered the city seeds into the soil. "Grow here," he said softly, "and remind the earth that even in the heart of chaos, compassion blooms." Seasons passed, and the seeds took root. The following spring, wildflowers of many colors spread through the valley of gold, crimson, blue, and white flowers the villagers had never seen before. They grew not in rows or patterns, but in natural harmony, blending with the rice fields and grasses. The elders said the valley had never looked more alive. "The river has returned his gift," they said. Aaron lived to see this bloom, and each day he sat beneath the trees, breathing in their fragrance, feeling the quiet rhythm of cause and effect all around him. He died one morning at sunrise, seated beside the river with his hands folded in his lap, a smile on his lips. The villagers buried him beneath the wildflowers he had brought, beside the 3 trees that had watched over countless lives. Years became centuries, and the valley continued to thrive. The trees grew higher, their roots spreading deeper, their leaves singing softly to the wind. The flowers that Aaron planted never stopped growing. They spread through the fields, up the hillsides, even along the mountain paths, painting the landscape in colors that glowed in the light of dawn and shimmered under the moon. Travelers who came from distant lands spoke of the valley as a place where time slowed and hearts healed, where even the weary found peace. They said the air carried a sweetness they could not name, and that when they left, the scent followed them for days. And so the story continued, just as it always had, not through monuments or scriptures, but through living hearts. The people of the valley still rose with the sun, still planted their fields with gratitude, still spoke softly to one another as though every word were a seed. They taught their children that karma was not a thing to believe or reject, but a truth to feel like the warmth of fire, the pull of gravity, or the flow of breath. They said that every moment was both a beginning and an ending, that life itself was the unfolding of karma, and that to live with awareness was to live in harmony with the infinite. And when the night grew quiet and the river glimmered under the starlight, the valley seemed to whisper its eternal message to anyone willing to listen. All that you are is what you have sown, and all that you will be is what you continue to plant. Love deeply, act gently, and let your life become the garden the universe longs to bloom. The story of the valley and its people is a reflection of all our lives, a quiet reminder that everything we do, every word, every gesture, every thought is a seed waiting for its moment to bloom. Through generations of kindness, forgiveness, patience, and renewal, they learned that karma is not a force that punishes or rewards, but a mirror that shows us who we are and what we bring into the world. The river never judged, yet it carried everything that entered it, returning in time what it received. So too does life flow through us, echoing back the energy we offer to others. When we act with compassion, we water the roots of peace. When we act in anger, we plant seeds of pain that will one day grow where we least expect them. The valley teaches us that change begins not in grand gestures but in small, mindful choices to listen before we speak, to forgive before resentment hardens, to give before we are asked. It teaches us to trust the unseen work of time, to believe that even when the harvest is slow to come, the earth never forgets a gentle hand. As you listen to these stories tonight, let your heart rest in that truth. You need not chase goodness or perfection, just plant kindness wherever you stand, and let the universe take care of the rest. What we sow in this moment will become the peace of tomorrow, the love that returns when we least expect it. Breathe deeply, Let go of what has passed and fall gently into stillness. And if this story has brought you calm or reminded you of the quiet balance of life, stay with us. Subscribe to Buddhism for sleep and continue this journey of awakening, of peace, of gentle understanding. Let each night be an act of planting, of kindness, of awareness, of love, and let these stories guide you home to the heart of stillness, where karma and compassion become one.